The heart acts as the motor of the cardiovascular superhighway. When broken down, it is a very simple four-chambered muscular pump. Like any pump, it has a motor, an electrical system, valves, and plumbing. The heart has two chambers on the top and bottom, along with two chambers on the right and left side, totaling four chambers. The two upper chambers are called the left and right atrium, though collectively we call them the atria. And the two lower chambers are called the left and right ventricles. The right-sided chambers receive blood from the body, where oxygen has been removed. This is deoxygenated blood. It is somewhat blue. That blood needs to resupply with more oxygen while dropping off the carbon dioxide it picked up from its trip to the tissues and organs before being transported back to the tissues to deliver more oxygen. It does this by being sent to the right side of the heart in preparation for a short trip to the lungs. The left-sided chambers receive blood just as it is returned from the lungs. That blood is now loaded with oxygen, making it bright red. The two upper chambers, again called the atria, are thin-walled compared to the thicker and stronger lower chambers, called the ventricles. The atria are thin-walled because they serve primarily as reservoirs and pump blood only a few inches to the right and left ventricular chambers below. There is no need for them to be thick and strong. The lower chambers, on the other hand, are much thicker, particularly the left ventricle. The left ventricle is the thickest because it has to pump blood to the head, arms, stomach, and toes. This requires a lot of energy and must generate enormous pressure to carry blood that far. The right ventricle, though thicker than the atria, is not nearly as thick as the left ventricle. The right ventricle only has to pump deoxygenated blood to and through the lungs. To do that, it doesn't have to produce much pressure, nor do that much work. The heart is connected to the rest of your circulatory system, the highways of arteries and veins that carry and distribute blood to all of your body. When put end to end, they would stretch out for well over a mile. Arteries generally carry oxygenated blood away from the heart, since it is their job to transport blood to the muscles, brain, and body. Veins, on the other hand, carry deoxygenated blood that has just left the tissues and organs back to the heart. It is under very low pressure. The tissues and organs do their job of stealing the oxygen and giving up carbon dioxide. Let's take a better look at the heart. To keep blood going in the correct direction, the heart has four one-way valves. Separating the upper and lower chambers on the right side of the heart is the tricuspid valve. The tricuspid valve is made up of three parachute-looking cusps that prohibit the backflow of blood when the right ventricle squeezes. On the left side, separating the upper and lower chambers, is the mitral valve. Unlike the tricuspid valve, it only has a front and back parachute. Let's look at how this works. The heart has an electrical system to tell it when to squeeze or contract. Disruption of the charge is what allows the heart to become excitable and contract. It is the movement of electrolytes almost at light speed that causes the physical contraction of the heart. There are differences between electrolyte concentrations within the heart cells and surrounding blood. Electrical stimulation is performed by a series of electrical tissues within the heart. The process of a single heartbeat begins at the top of the right atrium in a small area called the sinoatrial node, or SA node for short. This node serves as the pacemaker function of the heart and sets the rhythm and rate of your pulse. The SA node fires an electrical impulse that spreads out to the right and left atria, causing them to contract and squeeze blood into the ventricles below. It's important to know that the ventricles are electrically isolated from the atria, requiring an additional electrical component to make the lower half of the heart work. That additional part that controls the ventricles is called the atrioventricular node, or AV node. The AV node, located between the atria and ventricles, carries the electrical charge from the atria to the ventricles below. In normal circumstances, the AV node serves as the only electrical connection between the upper and lower halves of the heart, the though some patients with a heart rhythm problem may have additional connections. Built into the heart are special cells that are the equivalent to electrical wires. Notice how the electricity passes slowly through the AV node. It then travels down the His bundle through the left and right bundle branches. The final step in this process begins as the electrical signal passes to the ends of each bundle to little tentacles called Purkinje fibers. To allow time for the ventricles to adequately physically fill with blood before they pump the blood, this electrical process is slowed through the AV node. After this appropriate and necessary delay, the energy now will electrify the two ventricles nearly simultaneously, and immediately the lower ventricles will contract and force the blood out. On the right side of the heart, the blood will exit the right ventricle to go to the lungs. To do this, the blood will have to pass through another one-way valve called the pulmonic valve. From there, it will travel to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. This is a low-pressure system because the blood does not travel very far and because the lungs offer very little resistance to the blood passing through them. As it exits the lungs, the newly oxygenated blood returns to the left side of the heart through 4 tubes called the pulmonary veins. The pulmonary veins take the red blood full of oxygen from the lungs and deposit it back into the left atrium. Once the blood fills the left atrium, it is ready to move through the mitral valve and down to the left ventricle so it can be delivered to the body. The blood exiting the left ventricle is destined to spread through the whole body, with the exception of the lungs, as the lungs have already done their part. As that oxygen-rich blood exits the left ventricle, it must pass through the aortic valve to the aorta. The aorta is a large tube that carries the blood to the head, neck, vital organs, and even the feet. It is as thick as a garden hose and elastic, capable of stretching and withstanding great pressure inside. Keep in mind, this extensive process takes place within 1 heartbeat. The entire process starts with an electrical stimulus firing from the SA node. This stimulus excites the atria and causes them to contract, squeezing their contents to the ventricles below. The electrical impulse finds its way to the AV node, where it is slowed down, allowing the ventricles to completely fill. The impulse then speeds down the bundle of His, through the right and left bundles, to the Purkinje fibers, where it exits and stimulates the 2 ventricles, causing them to contract. Meanwhile, the valves open and close at the appropriate time, keeping the blood flowing in the correct direction. Once blood is oxygenated, it exits the heart through the branches of the aorta that carry blood to the head, neck, arms, and the lower body. There are many branches of the aorta, and they all have names. For example, the arteries that branch off the aorta to feed the brain are called the carotid arteries. Those that feed the kidneys are called the renal arteries. These examples are just 2 of many branches of the aorta. Once oxygenated blood reaches the tissues and organs, the oxygen is removed and replaced with carbon dioxide, the byproduct of tissue life, or metabolism. This deoxygenated blue blood gets back to the heart by exiting the tissues in low-pressure tubes called veins. Smaller veins in the lower body join together and connect to a large vein that drains the blood out of the lower body into the heart. That vein is called the inferior vena cava. Deoxygenated blood from the upper half of the body and the head is returned to the heart through the superior vena cava. Both the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava dump their contents into the right atrium of the heart. There is one more important structural component we need to show you to complete your circulatory system education, and that is the coronary arteries. These are the arteries that feed the heart muscle itself so it can perform its never-ending work. The heart can never take a break. It has to pump the blood constantly. To do that, it must have a continuous supply of freshly oxygenated blood that is never interrupted. This is the duty of the coronary arteries. In the average human, there are 3 coronary arteries. There are 2 on the left side of the heart and 1 on the right. The left main, LM coronary artery, arises from the left side of the base of the aorta and quickly splits into two branches. The branch that travels down the front surface of the heart is called the left anterior descending, LAD, coronary artery. The other branch of the left main coronary artery that goes around the back left side of the heart is called the left circumflex, LCX, coronary artery. The right coronary artery, RCA, arises from the right side of the base of the aorta. This coronary artery feeds the right ventricle and the lower portion of the heart. Any complete interruption in blood flow through these coronary arteries quickly results in a heart attack, called a myocardial infarction, MI. Partial blockages in these arteries that narrow but do not stop blood flow can result in chest pain from lack of blood flow to an area of the heart. That pain is usually called angina. The last thing we need to teach you about the cardiovascular system that will help you understand some of the heart topics in these videos is the EKG and how it works. The heart, in its resting state, is an electrically charged organ. When sensitive electrodes, capable of measuring small amounts of electricity, are placed around the heart, the electrical footprint of each heartbeat can be viewed, recorded, and measured. Both the upper and lower chambers of the heart leave an electrical trail. Through recording and examining the heartbeat with an EKG, cardiologists can make many inferences about the condition of the heart. Not only does the EKG record the electrical activity of the heart, it also records all the time intervals between them. We would like to give you a very basic understanding of what an EKG looks like, so we can help you understand a little better heart rhythm disorders. The first thing you'll notice while the EKG plays through is that there is a certain rhythm and predictability to its cycles. The first wave of a single heartbeat is called the P wave. It represents the electrical activity that causes the left and right atria to contract. The P wave is small because the right and left atria are small. Following the P wave, there is a slight delay, followed by a larger wave. This is called the QRS complex, and it represents both right and left ventricular contraction. After the QRS is a smaller and flatter wave called the T wave. The T wave represents repolarization, or resetting of the electrical charge of both ventricles. There is a slight delay before the process repeats itself for the second beat. This process continues over and over. We call it the pulse. As it plays through a few times, note how predictable and regular the pulse is in a person with normal heart rhythm. For now, that's all we're going to learn about the EKG. Having a good and thorough knowledge of the normal heart and cardiovascular anatomy and physiology will help you to better understand whatever cardiovascular topic you have chosen. The more you understand what has been presented in this lesson, the better you'll understand cardiovascular diseases. We encourage you to watch it again before you proceed to your cardiovascular-related topic.